Okay, so I made a video talking about RWBY Arrowfell, and in that review I briefly mentioned that I think RWBY would do very, very well as a game that's very similar to Fire Emblem, like a tactical RPG. And I said I could talk about this for hours, and so many people commented that they would love to see that, so I am here, I am ready, I have coffee, it is very early in the morning, I have no script, I've just written down some key important elements. Strap in, let's babble about RWBY as a Fire Emblem type of game. Okay, so first, why I think this would work well in this kind of format, because in Fire Emblem, if you haven't played, let me give you a bit of a rundown of what Fire Emblem is like if you haven't played it before. I do highly recommend it. I love those games. In Fire Emblem, you work as like a turn-based grid kind of format. A lot of the like smaller details of Fire Emblem I'll get into as I just describe aspects that I thought about. A brief summary is there's turns. There's your turn and then the enemy's turn, and then occasionally if there's like NPCs you need to save, their turn will be after. During your turn, you have your characters on the map, and it varies how many characters you can put out there, but it can range into very high numbers. Everyone moves on a grid-like system, and their different classes and weapons and abilities will let them hit certain enemies from a certain distance or direction. That's the main gist of it. The thing is that makes me think this would work really well is because RWBY as a show has so many wide concepts for characters, and it's hard to like classify all of them down into something that would have a kind of repeatable format. Like a fighting game kind of works, I think, but I feel like you would miss out on a lot of important aspects for the characters' wider range of abilities. Like a platformer or an MMO doesn't really feel like they would utilize all of their skills in as cohesively a way, you know? Especially because the characters move at such vastly different speeds from each other, and everyone has so many abilities. Keeping track of all of it without just limiting you to playing as only one character feels like it's too much for other things, but it would work in this kind of format because you move the whole army, because in Fire Emblem you get an army's worth of characters. You can get 20 plus characters sometimes in your army. Not all of them are always on the field at any given point in time, but that's part of the fun. You get to switch up who you want to focus on in different playthroughs, who you want to bring into battle and stuff. So, okay, so like that's the basic gist of it. So I'm gonna go into some basic ideas that I would think would work for a RWBY specific format. First things first, stats. Everyone needs stats, so then when you level up, you can get some stat points. I like how Fire Emblem does it, where you don't always get the same amount of stats when you level up. It's like randomized which stats level up and how much. Sometimes you'll get like one stat point and that's it, which it allows for like fun variety as you play. You know, sometimes you luck out and like Brady gets like a million stats in a row, and so he just ends up becoming this great tank, especially when you goof up and you accidentally make him a samurai, even though he's supposed to be a cleric. But it worked. I made it work. And sometimes Brady just gets terrible stats and he doesn't get to do anything. So you focus on other characters. So that's part of the fun of it. So here's what I think RWBY's stats would be. They're similar to Fire Emblem's, but with a couple of differences. First, HP. Obvious, that would be how much health you have. It's called Constitution in Fire Emblem. HP, health points, it's, you know. Strength stat. This is for physical things, like your weapon, your physical weapon, like swinging the sword, the blade of it, Yang's punches, not the dust. You know, just the physical attack. For the dust, magic, and semblances that have some sort of attack-like property, I would put those all under a special category, and I would call it special. I could call it magic, but then people would be pedantic that technically dust isn't magic or whatever. Yeah, anything that isn't a physical attack, it would be a special attack, and that would be like bullets, for example, because bullets are fueled by dust. I'll get into how bullets will work, just stick with me. On that related note, you have defense and resistance. This is exactly how Fire Emblem does it. Defense is what protects you against other physical attacks. Resistance is what protects you against special attacks, okay? So you could have high defense and you'll be fine if someone tries punching you, but you could have low resistance and a simple little fireball will take you out. So then there's speed, and I like how Fire Emblem does speed, because that's always the thing that seems to trip up a lot of people, is like you look at RWBY and the first thing you go is, how do I do her semblance? Because her semblance, I know it lets her carry things, but in effect with a combat system, it's basically just how fast she goes. How do we do that? Well, speed in Fire Emblem is just how far on the map you can travel. Like, if a map is like 20 blocks big, your speed dictates how many blocks you can move at a point in time. And some characters can get super high speeds, and so they move further, and I like that way of like conceptualizing the idea of speed. And then, final thing, luck. Everyone loves a luck stat, and that's also just like how likely you are to land a critical hit. Just a fun extra wild card element thrown in there. So, to help you kind of visualize how these different stats would work on a character, I've given Team RWBY stats so you can see what I'm like thinking of. The idea is, in their base form, they would have a total of 20 points per stat that as you level up, you eventually could fill up to 20 points maximum, but you could potentially go over with certain items. But that would be like figuring out how to like balance the game kind of thing. Like those smaller details that I'm not super good at figuring out. So let me just throw up the rest of their stats up on the screen. And as you can see, like my idea is RWBY would be the all-around character. You know, all of her stats are kind of similar. Her biggest one being her speed, just because so then she can travel further, and RWBY has a lot of speed, but she's like nice rounded character, so you can always default to her if you're in a bit of a pinch. Out of the 4, I also gave RWBY the highest luck stat, because I figure to have silver eyes, you gotta be pretty lucky. For Weiss, I wanted her to be a specialist. She has the highest special stat out of the 4 girls. Resistance, not a lot of strength or defense or HP, but she's like a glass cannon, you know? She comes in, she hits hard with her special attacks, but she's also squishy. Very mage, very run-of-the-mill mage. I gave her the second highest luck stat also because I'm like, you're a princess. You have to be born lucky to be in such a high-standing rich family, right? For Blake, I wanted to go with someone who's more defensive, evasive, stuff like that. On that note, I think your speed stat would also help boost how likely you are to avoid hits in the middle of combat. And because Blake is a ninja and that's her whole thing, I wanted her to have a somewhat high speed stat, not as high as RWBY's. I also gave Blake the lowest luck stat because she's gone through a lot. Her life, I don't think she would classify her life as very lucky. And Yang, obviously, you know, all attack. You know, big HP, big strength, big damage, low defense, low speed especially. It would take her forever to get there, but once she's there, you're screwed, right? So, and this is like my idea. And I think you could play around with this like a bunch, like for Juniper and like Oscar and Penny and stuff. I think Oscar would have a really high luck stat. In my mind, Oscar is like the Donnie of the team, right? Like, he garbage stats, but huge luck. So if you focus and you like work on him and you make him good, he could be the best out of the whole game. Yum yum coffee. So, and then there's semblances. So in Fire Emblem, everyone can have abilities, and those things, they do different things, different boosts to the characters. That's where we're gonna get like the character-specific uniqueness going on here. Here's my rundown of what I would do for the main characters I would have in mind for a specific spin-off kind of game. RWBY, her semblance, Petal Burst. It would just give her a boost to her speed, and I would also have it so she can have a dash during her turn. So rather than doing an attack, if she wanted to dash so she could go further, she could do that because of her semblance. I would also give her the ability of Silver Eyes, which would make it more likely to crit against Grim, because you can have multiple different abilities. Weiss, her glyphs, which would give her a boost to either speed, attack, or resistance. You would have to choose at the start of the turn which one you want to prioritize. And I would also have her have a summon, where she could summon like a Grim, like it would be like a kind of like an NPC. It would pop up and help fight for her. It would be weak, but it would be something to help distract enemies so she can run away, right? Blake, her shadow clones, which would raise her evasion, you know, so she's more likely to avoid or dodge hits. Yang, with her boost, she would take extra damage, but it would also raise her attack. For Jean, with his aura amp, he gets to heal an ally. He's basically just a healer. He could spend a turn healing instead of attacking. Nora, charge, would raise her crit rate, but also make her more susceptible to crits herself, so that's a fun little challenge, little danger if you want to play with. Ren specifically raises evasion and defense against grim enemies. For Oscar, I would say sometimes he just blocks all damage and lands a critical parry instead. It was a little hard to figure out something for Oscar because he doesn't have a semblance yet, but I wanted to work with the magic thing, and I was thinking of his like magic shield dome, and that's what I was thinking of. It would block the hit and then like bounce back and hit the enemy with its own force, basically. And then Penny, because she has so much going on, I think you could play around with a lot of different ideas, but I would prioritize, her like starting ability would be a copy ability, so she can take one of the abilities of the other characters, specifically because I wanted you to have the option of having more than one healer on the team. Like, if Jean's the only one who can heal, you're gonna be dragging him into every single fight, and you might not want that. So I wanted the option of her also being a healer. So, combat. Like I was saying, you don't always, like the way you hit an enemy isn't the same for every character. It changes depending on your class, and I'll get into classes for a second. For now, I just want to focus on how I would envision, like, RWBY, Weiss, Blake, and Yang, how they would hit enemies. So for RWBY, you know, if you have an enemy, there are certain squares around them that you can reach. I would say RWBY could reach from the top, bottom, left, and right 1 to 2 spaces away because of how long Crescent Rose's reach is. And if you want to use your gun, I would say she could hit from the same directions, but from 3 to 5 spaces away, which seems like a very far distance, but I would balance that out by having her gun be not as strong, but it reaches further. It is a sniper rifle, after all. You can either use your weapon or your gun, or if you have a certain semblance or ability that lets you do a different action, you could have a range of attack for that, but you can only pick one per turn, and depending on how close or far you are from the enemy is how you could choose to which one you would want to use, right? Like, if you have, in Fire Emblem, like if you have a certain weapon that hits from further away, you can choose to use it, or if you have like a sword that hits from close up, you could instead try to use that, but it doesn't always work depending on which angle of the enemy you're standing at. For Weiss, I would have her be able to hit from all sides from 1 space away for her rapier, and for Dust, I want her to be able to hit from the top, bottom, left, and right for 2 to 3 spaces away. I would say the Dust would be stronger, but, you know, you want something in case you're right next to the enemy, right? For Blake, I would have her hit from the top, bottom, left, and right from 1 space away for her sword. For her bullets, I would have it be 2 spaces away or diagonal. You know, does that make sense? Like if you're standing catty-corner to the enemy, she could only use her dust against them. But if she was right next to them, top, bottom, left, or right, she could use her sword. And Yang, I would have her be able to hit from 1 space from all sides, but I would have you be able to choose either her physical hit or her dust hit, no matter what direction you're coming in from. Because certain enemies would be weaker to physical damage versus special damage, right? And usually the way you figure out like how far people can hit from which distance or where and why is based on their classes. So if you see like an archer, you know they can hit you from 2 spaces away, sometimes further depending on which game you're playing. So I would here's what I would do with classes. So in Fire Emblem, once you reach like a max level, I think it's level 20 if I remember correctly, you then get to like level up basically into a new upgraded class. And that's what I would do because I think that's fun, because then also when you come back and you play the game again, you could choose a different direction, right? And it would change your stats and would change what moves you learn and stuff. But that keeps it fresh and new and alive and different and stuff, and that's cool. Yeah, so for RWBY, I would have her class be labeled as Hero, and when she levels up, which is basically just like an all-around kind of class, but when she levels up, she could choose to either be a champion or a warrior. Champion is more like, it focuses on special and resistance kind of stats, where warrior is more strength and defense focused. Other characters who would be classified as hero would be Penny, Sun, Neon, characters who don't feel niche enough to fit a specific other class, but they're still heroes, right? For Weiss, I would have her class be Dust Wielder, you know, some basically mage right? She would either evolve into just specialist or jack of all trades. I couldn't think of a more like put together title other than jack of all trades. For a specialist focus, it would be evasion and special and luck stat. For jack of all trades, it would focus on HP, special, and defense. Others who would be classified as dust wielders would be Flint, Velvet, Watts, you know, the ones who, they don't get physical, but they use their magical, quote-unquote, magical abilities. Yeah, for Blake, I would have her be classified as an acrobat, which is like evasion-based, you know, and she would evolve into either ninja or tactician. Ninja would focus on speed and evasion more. Tactician would focus on special and HP. Others who would be classified as acrobats is like Ren, Tyrion, Neo. Yang I would have be a brawler, which I think is self-explanatory, and she can evolve into pugilist or berserker. Pugilist focuses on strength, defense, and evasion, where berserker focuses on strength and HP. Others who would be classified as this is like Mercury, Hazel, Fox. Jean I would have be called a swordsman. Again, I think it's self-explanatory. You could evolve into Knight or Guard. Knight would be focused on strength and special. Guard would focus on defense and resistance. Other swordsmen would be Pyrrha, Oscar, Raven, I think would work this way. And then Nora I would have as a heavy. And then she could evolve, you know, big attack, big HP, damage sponge, but can't move very far. I would have her evolve into Tank or Turret. Tank would focus on HP, defense, and resistance. Turret would focus on strength, special, and luck. So do you want to be more like a damage sponge, or do you want to be able to actually hit things? Other characters I would classify as heavy would be Koko, Crow, Yatsuhashi. And depending on which different path you would take, you would get different special abilities that would, like, as you evolve, you get new abilities on top of your semblances and stuff. And I have, like, for an example, Jean, if he became a knight, he would get an ability that makes his reach longer, or would raise his critical hit rate. If Jean chose Guard, he would get an ability that raises the amount of HP he can heal with his semblance. Or, if allies were standing next to him, their defense would raise. You know, things like that. Fun, tactical things that make choosing the different paths different and exciting, but equally cool, right? Like lots of times, it was Fire Emblem, Fates. I never played around with evolving people in different ways because it never worked, it never mattered. You had one path that was like the good path, and then a path that was like, don't do that, that makes no sense. So I would want them all to be fun and equally cool. And then there could be like other classes that I haven't listed here. Like, I think we could do something for archer related characters like Robin and Cinder, you know? It doesn't have to just be these, but this is, I wanted to focus on our main characters here. So now that we have like gameplay figured out, what would the game be about, right? Okay, so here's the story idea I came up with. I was pretty proud of it, so let's go. So it would start with your tutorial level, and it would obviously be the classic Red trailer. Like, the map would be based on the Red trailer, and it would start with RWBY and like 2 to 4 Beowulf Grimm, and it would teach you the basic mechanics as you kill those 4 Grimm, you know? And then suddenly, more Grimm would show up, but it would be like, rather than just Beowulfs, there would be an Ursa, and a Nevermore, and like a King Taijutsu maybe. And she would be confused. She's like, I don't remember this. And then there'd be Weiss, Blake, and Yang with her in this scenario. And it would teach you how their moves work and stuff like that. Then once you kill those new Grimm, suddenly you're surrounded by Grimm, and there's a giant wyvern, and RWBY wakes up. The tutorial is just a dream. It would take place in Volume 7, just like the Justice League movie or Arrowfell. I wanted it to specifically be Volume 7, because I want Penny. I want Penny to be alive and in the main story. Also, I wanted Oscar to be there. This is our main team. These are the main characters. I wanted these. This is our squad. So this was the best place to put the story. So it's Volume 7, RWBY wakes up, and the main map would be in Atlas/Mantle and whatever, but what the story would be is places are getting robbed in the middle of the night. First it'd be like homes, but then like a hospital gets ransacked, and then a military base. And the weirdest thing is every single time, no one's ever awake. Not even the guards who are like on duty. Everyone who is supposed to be awake just suddenly falls asleep, and they stay asleep until the robberies are over. So what that means is you would have like your story scene in Atlas/Mantle, but then you would fall asleep after your next mission. After that, you would fall asleep, and your dream would be a memory of one of the past events of the show. And because I really wanted, there's so many cool iconic places and moments, and I wanted to be able to fit all of it into one story, but I couldn't figure out how, so it's all just a dream. It's a memory. And you could play around with so many different locations and timestamps this way, and it also makes sense so then you can have your whole cast of characters you want, right? Like, even if, like, let's say we have a dream and it takes place during the floating islands, the anti-gravity islands in Volume 5 for Weiss. You know, Yang and RWBY aren't there, but what if you want them in the battle, because they're like your favorite characters, and you want them in this fight too? You don't want to play as exclusively Weiss, who is the only character in this scene. If it's a dream, it's an excuse to see the event play out, but also have all the other characters be there with you, because in this scenario, everyone dreams together. Like they're all having a shared dream experience, like a shared memory, basically. And yeah, so everyone could be there, and it wouldn't break canon or anything. And also, if we did it this way, we could go to like past scenes, past iconic classic RWBY moments, and then once they do the thing, we could have the characters stop and like reminisce about these scenes, about these moments, talk about things that they miss, the characters they miss, things they regret, things they loved, things like that. And it would be really cool. Like, we could do a scene where we go to Foreverfall, you know, and we do the classic Ursa kill and whatever. And then once we're done, we could have a moment where Jean talks about Pyrrha, and RWBY and Jean could talk about her a little bit and how they miss her and they're gonna move forward. We could have Oscar meet Ozpin in a dream and see what he was like. We could have this thing where Penny sees past Penny during, like, it could be the tournament arc, right when she dies. It would be this moment where RWBY could talk to Penny about what she feels about all this. And it'd be this cool thing where not only we get to see the cool iconic moments from the show, but the characters as they currently were in Volume 7 could have like specific moments where they stop and reflect on these moments and talk to each other about how they've grown and the things they liked and miss and whatever, and it would be cool. Oh, it would be so cool. So what's happening? Why is everyone falling asleep? So what the story would be is there's a new Grim that I'm introducing called a Baku Grim. If you're familiar with yokai lore or Drowsy / Musharna, you might understand what Baku is already. Baku is a yokai, a mythical creature from Japanese lore, where they steal your dreams, basically. Like, they eat your dreams. Like when you go to sleep and you wake up and you're like, I didn't dream last night. The idea is Baku ate your dream. That's why those Pokemon look like that. So yeah, it's a Baku Grim that can make you fall asleep, similar to the apathy, you know, but rather than just making you disinterested in existence, it makes you fall asleep. Team RWBY discovers there's these huge tunnels traveling all underneath Mantle, and the Baku Grim are under there. But these little Grim aren't enough to make people fall asleep to that strong of a degree, right? That many people for that sound of a sleep? What we discover is there's these two, like, criminals running around. Sandra Mandrake and Buggy Mandrake. They'd be siblings, twins, maybe? They're based on the Sandman and the Boogeyman. They have found a way to trap a extra large Baku Grim underneath in these tunnels. I would like, you know how there's like Alpha Beowulf or like Queen Lancer? This would be a Nightmare Baku. And so they've trapped it, and it's big enough and strong enough to make everyone fall asleep, and that's what they're doing. They're making the Grim. Once everyone falls asleep, they go in and they steal things. Why are they evil? So, Sandra's semblance lets her and others stay awake no matter what, even with the strength of the Nightmare Baku. She wanted to be a huntress, but she thought she would be useless with such a niche semblance. Buggy's semblance lets him elevate emotions, so Grimm are attracted to others. And that's how he's getting the Baku to do what he wants, to like affect other people. He's raising people's emotions, so the Nightmare Baku affects them, and like then they can go in and steal places. And again, he wanted to be a huntsman, but no one wanted to be on a team with him because his semblance puts them in danger every time they're around Grimm. And so to like spite everyone and the world, they're now going around just robbing things and being menaces and terrors, and that would be the story. Team RWBY have sleep adventures where they have memories of the things that they went through, and when they wake up they need to figure out what's going on and how to stop the bad guys. And I think it would be pretty dang cool. That's like the gist. And then, if you want, you could add more to it. So I think it would be cool if in the dream scenario, they wear the outfits they wore in those moments. Like, if we're in modern day, they would have their Volume 7 outfits, right? But if we dream and we're suddenly in, like, Volume 2 during the train fight, they would have their Volume 2 outfits. And then you could also have, like, DLC for different outfits, you know? In Fire Emblem 3 Houses, you can just, like, choose to wear different costumes in battle. So no matter what your class is, you can look a specific way. And you could do that. And you could play around with, like, all the different outfits they've had, their prom outfits, pajamas, stuff like that, right? You could also have DLC for different battles. Like, if you go through the story and there's, like, 25 chapters, and then you're like, oh man, there was so many other cool iconic moments I wanted to have for this kind of story, you could just have DLC and then just be like, and now here's this other pack of other misadventures and stuff. And so you could have more and more battles from classic iconic scenes from the show. Maybe even like future volumes? It would be weird. You would have to explain it away somehow, but you could play around with it. It's lots of times DLC is very non-canon, so you could just do whatever you want. And then also, of course, DLC for characters who wouldn't fit the canon of the story you're playing as. Like, no, it wouldn't make sense for Team Coffee to be in Atlas at this point in time. They're in Vacuo, canonically. But I like Team Coffee, so we could have them as DLC characters, so they can be there and be cool, and you could watch them be cool and fight, and it wouldn't, like, interrupt the flow of the story. And that's basically it, right? And then from there, it's just like actual game development, like figuring out what the different levels would look like, different maps, different enemies, like the Grimm. That's what I would do. That was my plan. That's what I want. That's what I really want. I think that would be the coolest way to do a RWBY video game. I want it. I don't know if it'll ever exist, but I'm just throwing it out there because I think it's fun and exciting and cool, and I would buy it. Do you hear me, Viz Media? If there was a game like this, I would buy it. Shout out to my $10 patrons. You're all amazing. Andrew, Valhalla Knight, Chamomile, Classic Critic, Genital War Thunder, Jake, Amber, Hype Man, Scaring Crows, Not All That Evil, Holly, Messiah, Jacob, Ben's Sketchbook, Rain, Omega Fighter, Trash, Wild Pilot, Josh, Twisty, Juan, Bunkin Duncan, Hoodie Angel, Ranger, Hut Mutt Butt, Cloudy Days, The Enigma, Primaroon, Overhypen, Curse Knight, Plague, Unspoken, Tyrene, Thanos, Pandemonium, Peter, Agiri, and BR Beginner. What do you think? Do you have ideas? What do you think of anything I thought of? This is very, like I'm not like a game developer or anything. This is very, like, Route 1 basic concepts. I could have given them all garbage stats and I wouldn't even realize. So, whatever you're thinking, I want to hear it. Especially if it's about this. What kind of game would you want to see from RWBY? And I hope you had fun. I had fun. This was a fun way to finish drinking my coffee this morning. So let me know what you're thinking in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.